That may be.
Oh, let's mute all the microphones. Hello, everybody. It's just so happy to see you. And as we mute our microphones, we're welcoming gently into this Friday meeting. It's a Mac meeting. It's a reality check this time. We have Moni here, we have Michael here, we have Jessica here, Jay is here, and we have a special guest. It's Dale Harrison. We got to introduce you just a little bit because everybody, I want you to know Dale's out here dropping gems on people on LinkedIn. I call him the Dale Force Wind because he just shows up there and just blows, stacks down whatever kind of haystack they have, whatever brick, wall that they think they have. He comes down, but he does it with receipts. And that's the thing that I love. He's not pulling this out of the sky. He's pulling it out of research and a dedication to bringing some empiricism and some science and some grounding to what we're talking about. So Dale, you're amazing. And that's just how I feel. Maybe people feel different. But Dale, give us a brief intro, like your pathway really quick, just from where you started to how you ended up in marketing, and then what inspired the conversation today.
So where did I start? So I always explain to people that everything I know about marketing, I learned by studying physics.
Yeah.
It's
that's how most marketers think that of themselves. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So actually long ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So long ago, I started as an experimental physicist. So I did superconductivity work. I have a whole bunch of like peer-reviewed research papers in serious journals. But then that was a long time ago, and a lot of things I've done a lot of things in between. So, but somewhere along the way, through a series of poorly thought out life choices, I ended up in marketing.
Also,
me too, but I don't have any physics experience.
Okay, keep going.
So, mostly do B2B, although I have done B2C. I've worked on projects with Fortune 10 companies, and I've worked on projects with, pre-launch startups. So, kind of the full gamut. And, but obviously I come with a very strong technical mathematical background. I've spent years in technology businesses, a lot of robotics and automation stuff before I went into biotech, before I went into marketing. So, I've figured I've written about 2 or 2.5 million lines of programming code over my career. Picked up about 40 programming languages. Haven't really done any, production code in 20 years, but but there was a while. But it gives me the ability to see things from different perspectives, and then a lot of people that just have spent their entire career just in marketing.
Right. Oh my God, my gosh. I mean, yeah, we're all sort of hammers looking for nails. That's why when I found the word marketing science originally, many years ago, I was like, what? Is that true? Because you think it's the Claude Hopkins kind of, Rosser Reeves kind of magic, influence, like that's the science. But then you actually find out there's people who have been studying this for many decades, and you a lot of that research, particularly from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, econometricians is what they call them in the UK, people who care about where the money goes. Like Les Binet, Peter Field, there's a lot of these things that you're pulling from.
Yeah.
But today's topic was the spiciest because I've read How Brands Grow, and I was like, this is amazing. I love this. I now brands grow. And then, you feel like you're on some high hog because everyone else is talking about buy my app. You need an app. You need this short-term thing. And you're like, it's a bit of a mix. But then you show up and you're like, even this is more nuanced. And there's a difference in between complicated stuff and complex stuff. And I started to unpeel these things. And after I read this upcoming thing, and I want you to walk us through it, because I'm hoping that people feel that their skulls just get kind of like rocked back, because finish this. I was like, this fundamentally changes how I'm thinking about marketing from here out. So go to the next slide real quick. Wait,
But by the way, I'll throw one thing out.
Yes, please. Yes, throw something out.
Les Binet and I share some interesting similar backgrounds. He originally started out as a physicist.
No way.
So he did. So he was doing doctoral work under Peter Higgs, the Nobel laureate and discoverer of the Higgs boson that gives us gravity. And then he later went back and studied economics, and specifically econometrics. And I have the same background. I ended up along the way picking up an extra graduate degree in econometrics. And so our early careers actually have very interesting parallels. But you see this in his work. He's a very, very rigorous thinker. And the research reports he puts out are among the most solid in the industry. And so that comes really directly from that formative training in the hard sciences.
Oh, that's why I think I felt such a gravity, particularly towards Les, who I've talked to. He's given me a lot. Like, we've set aside time. I met with him once, and I was like out of my body. I was like, "Am I talking to you?" And he was a completely normal person, and loves punk rock. Like, has this kind of like wild style about him. But he's such a brilliant guy. But this is at the heart of it. This is the meeting. This is the meat. Let's talk about the flaw at the heart of how brands grow, because it's shaking all my world up. Okay, Dave.
Okay, so I'll get.
Oh yeah, go back.
Oh wait, sorry. I'm bad at this
Oh
production.
good. No, we're good.
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I can control the slides from here.
Yeah. Okay, you go.
Okay.
So the flaw at the heart of how brands grow. So how brands grow. That's I think this is probably the number one question asked by marketers everywhere. But it presupposes a couple of other things that never get asked. And so the first one is, what do we actually mean by the word growth? Because it turns out there are lots of different kinds of growth, and and a lot of the narrative within marketing is completely conflating utterly unrelated things all under a single term. This is a bad thing. And then the other thing is, do brands actually grow? Because everyone wants to know how to grow, but no one asks, do they actually grow? And the answer is, they pretty much don't grow. And we'll see this in a second. So let's start with defining our words. What does growth mean? So there's really kind of, in a business context, there are going to be four possible definitions. Are we growing market share? Are we growing revenue? Are we growing profits? Or are we doing asset growth, meaning growing the market capitalization of the entity, of the business entity? Each of these has very different implications.
Am I allowed to say something or ask a question?
Wait. Yeah, and yeah, if you have them, put them in the chat, and then just raise your hand there. But Michael, go ahead.
Yeah.
For me, it's awareness, and I'm not understanding why I don't see that on the list.
Awareness is an input, not an output.
That's what I'm saying. Let's just hold off on those questions. Please put them in the chat, because Dale is we're in the middle of a star tour. Okay, keep going, Dale.
No, I mean, it's a good question though. Awareness is awareness is the screwdriver in the toolbox that we use to accomplish something else. We need it in the same way that a mechanic needs some screwdrivers, but it's not the end goal. The end goal is to get the engine running, or to keep it running, or to make it run faster. And the other thing is that you actually can't grow awareness not past a certain ceiling, and we can talk about that in a minute. So awareness is, so awareness of the brand is in a dynamic equilibrium in the market, because you're spending money to implant memories or refresh memories about the brand. But then all of those brains that you're spending the money to place the memories into are rapidly forgetting what you put in their head. And so you're like pouring water in a bucket and water's draining out of the bottom of the bucket. And with the right sort of balance between how much goes in the top and how much comes out the bottom, there'll be a fixed amount of water in the bucket. And this is what you see in the real market, is that different brands have a finite upper ceiling for the amount of awareness that they can achieve based on the amount of reach, and then the details of their product category. Some products tend to be forgotten faster than other products. So high consideration goods have a longer memory typically than low consideration goods. And but there's some maximum upper limit of brand awareness that can be achieved and held. And that limit is completely constrained by your existing share of market. And we'll go into some details on that in a few slides.
Great.
So if you think about asset growth, from a business standpoint, this is the only thing the business cares about. This is what the board cares about. This is what the investors care about. So business exists solely to increase the asset value of the entity relative to shareholder index.
Oh, gotta mute that.
But it turns out that growing asset value doesn't necessarily require taking market share, doesn't require even making a profit, doesn't even require generating any revenue. But this is the reason the business exists. And you see examples of companies that, with some amazing technology that they're almost getting ready to go to market, and then some company comes in and swoops them up. And so this is a company that's never generated $1 revenue, has zero market share, never turned a profit, and yet there's sufficient asset value that the investors are willing to sell out. So, but this is what businesses are really about: asset growth. Profit growth is another one. This is certainly probably one of the most important operational metrics, but it's one that marketing really has at best an indirect role in. And then there's revenue growth, because marketing is really not about making a profit, because we can't control how much the rest of the business is wasting to get that product delivered. But we do have some control over the amount of revenue. And so it turns out that if you really look at brands, about 99+% of all brand growth is purely in the form of revenue growth. Almost every high growth brand that gets talked about is just growing revenue. It's not growing market share. And the problem is that much of what drives revenue growth has relatively little to do with actual marketing activities. You can screw it up, but you can't necessarily make it better. And I'll give you a very specific example. Earlier in my career, I was with a company that in 10 years' time, this company underwent 1,000-fold growth in revenue. So during my period of time there, I was there for about 5.5 or 6 years. And during my tenure there, we underwent 100-fold growth in revenue. As did all our competitors. And what was happening was the underlying product category was undergoing massive expansion. And we were busy trying to, we basically had all put our boats on a rising lake. And we were all busy trying to make sure we didn't capsize the boat. Because as long as we didn't capsize the boat, we would rise with the lake level. Didn't really require a lot of genius marketing to do 100-fold growth in revenue in 5.5 years. At the end of that period, every single competitor had exactly the same market share that they had 10 years earlier when these companies had first entered the category. So you can see absolutely massive revenue growth and just no market share change whatsoever. So 10 years later, the market share leader was still the market share leader. The smallest company in the category was still the smallest company. Everyone had essentially the same market share. And the only differences were that we had competitors who stumbled along the way. And when they went out of business, their market share tended to get divvied up among the survivors, basically proportionate to each company's existing market share. So if you had a 10% market share and a competitor went under, you could count on capturing about 10% of their customers. So businesses can be very profitable and be very high growth and not take market share. But the conversation within marketing is exclusively around the question of market share. And the fact is that if you look at the underlying data, going back almost a century of data, market share growth essentially never happens. Relative market share is extremely stable over the span of years to decades. Yet, almost all marketing talk is focused exclusively around questions of market share growth. And the specific example is absolutely every single word in the How Brands Grow books and all of the work out of the Aaron Burke Bass Institute is exclusively talking about growing market share. And we'll see in a minute that this is really quite rare to see market share growth actually ever occur. So a couple of things about market share growth versus revenue growth. Brands can grow revenue while massively losing market share. Great example right now is Visible. They are just sinking in terms of market share, even though their revenue is going up each year. At the same time, brands can be taking significant market share while seeing dramatic declines in revenue. Good example is the Ricoh fax machines in the early 2000s, that you had companies abandoning the fax machine market. Ricoh and Brother were the ones who really benefited from that. As the entire fax machine category was collapsing, they were gaining market share. As others exited the market. So market share and revenue are in no way correlated to one another. But, each one can go up or down completely independent of the other.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. Well, then hold on. Does anybody have any questions before Dale keeps going? Because it is so amazing.
Lot. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just how about one?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jessica,
Hi,
you're live.
I'm so sorry. I am trying to just get along in this world, and I came late, and I apologize because this is really cool. It's very fun. I remember. Anyway, I'm not going to. So what about Uber? Okay, let's talk about, they really had a lot of market share and growth. Profitability, I guess, is a whole nother thing that we're not even we can, but I just want to know, you gave Ricoh as the example for the market share leader versus revenue. And I just where does Uber kind of, and I guess the other element is for time, what point in time are you talking about? So
what do you mean by what point in time?
If we're talking about this year, now Uber is finally profitable and they have a good market share, but there are other players that have moved into this cars on demand space where they were the leader, and at one point they only, their competition was different. And so I guess the variable I think about is over time, nothing's staying still.
Right. And so we're 2 or 3 slides away from actually exactly answering this question.
Okay.
This is good. This is good. But there are cases where you can take market share. That we'll get to in just a second.
Great. Okay. It's like Ozymandias over here. It's like at one point, we're gonna get back to zero.
Right.
So I love what you're talking about. So okay, keep going.
So how do brands really grow? There are only 4 mechanisms. So you can grow by taking your share of the organic growth of the underlying product category, essentially riding the wave. Especially you see this heavily in tech. You see lots and lots of companies come in behind typically you'll see 1 or 2 or 3 first movers in a category. And then you'll see this flood of companies come in behind them, the Me Too's. And a lot of these Me Too's will see huge revenue growth because they're simply riding the wave of the underlying category growth itself. The other mechanism, and this goes to answering the Uber question, if there's someone that's willing to drop tens or hundreds of millions or billions of external capital on you over a multi-year period, you can use that to buy market share. And this is the whole excess share of market concept. I'm sorry, excess share of voice concept, the ESOV concept.
Mm-hmm.
If you can pour significant volumes of money into reach, you can take market share by simply having a larger voice in the market. And we know this is true. There's research and data that goes all the way back into the mid 1960s on this. So this is a very established fact. And so, for instance, Oatly, Liquid Death, Warby Parker, all these companies that everyone loves to talk about, they grew because someone was willing to dump several $100 million. I mean, Warby had $700 million dropped on them before they were ever able to turn a profit. Liquid Death had $350 million. Oatly, $200 million. So, if someone's willing to drop $500 million on me, I have to be a special kind of incompetence. I have to have a special sort of incompetence to not be able to grow something with that money.
I bet I could.
So,
I bet I could get something going on.
So let me ask you this though: those three brands appear. I mean, Liquid Death, I'm uninspired by, but Warby Parker took what Luxottica was doing and made the $100 pair of glasses accessible. And Oatly is like by far a better product than any of these other oat milks I've ever had.
Oh, I'm not saying that these aren't great products or are great, that they don't have great delivery.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to do, even with $500 million, dropped in your bank account, you still need a good product.
Yeah.
If nobody wants to buy it, it doesn't matter how many people you tell.
Yeah. So you're saying that
product.
a multi-year injection of massive amounts. So does that go back to making everyone possibly aware of it? Is that it?
It's purely about establishing a massive level of excess share of voice over a multi-year, sometimes multi-decade period. And this is how Uber grew. Uber grew because someone put several $1 billion of external investment into the company that they spent on letting people know that Uber exists and getting people to keep using Uber.
So I have a question. Like Oatly, everybody loves those ads. Different ads, those are different. Liquid Death, y'all don't know what marketing is. Liquid Death is doing it right. Everybody loves fawns over these things. I'm not saying that that's not good. I love the way you did this. I like that. But you've been given so much cash to do this. And Oatly almost had a kind of fuck you vibe with their ads. They were like, we bought this billboard and we don't even know. Buy drinks.
When you have $250 million that somebody stuffed into your back pocket, it's easy to have attitude.
And to have it, and we were praising them, saying like, isn't it brave? Isn't it cool? They find back the reins. And you find out that those reins are golden handcuffs that some rich sugar daddy gave it to him. Like, come on, man.
So, a number of these companies have great ads. Certainly Oatly has great ads. Liquid Death has great ads. An amazing, fabulous ad that gets shown to 100 people is not going to do anything. But if you can show it to 500 million people because somebody gave you a giant pot of money, then that great ad is going to have some real impact. But the deal is even if you had a crappy ad, because none of Warby Parker's ads, nothing that Warby Parker has ever put out as an ad, is going to be mistaken for great ad.
The only thing they did was they told people that you could try on 5 pairs of glasses or something like that. It's all boring, right?
Yeah. But the point is, $700 million worth of boring buys you a lot of market share.
Damn, son. Okay, all right. We could keep going. I want you to keep going because you have so much more. Okay, good example. Contentious, hot button, third rail topic. Let's go to the third issue. The way you can grow.
So the third way is you can be lucky enough to have the market share leader implode and shed market share.
All right.
And you're seeing this right now with both Salesforce. Not with Salesforce now, but if you go back and you look from the late 90s into the early 2010s, A lot of Salesforce's growth was being lucky enough to have the right product at the right time, just as the multi-billion-dollar incumbent completely imploded. Because at the time that Salesforce launched, the company that owned the CRM market was Siebel, and they had owned the CRM market since the 1960s. And they were and they were a multi-billion-dollar company with something close to 80% market share. But the problem was they stumbled because they were convinced that the future of business computing was around the AS400 and similar mini computer platforms. And so they completely ignored the PC network revolution that was going on, and ended up stumbling so badly that they basically had to sell themselves off in a fire sale to Adobe. And they're now the Adobe CRM product. Which has I don't know, 3% market share or something.
Right.
So Salesforce, Salesforce did a lot of things right with the product, with the marketing, but the thing that they did more right than anything else was being lucky enough to have their largest competitor fall on their face. Right now, Hockey Stack is seeing a growth. If you look at the details in the data, Visible is just collapsing, even though they're still making money. And in fact, they're still showing some revenue growth because the underlying, marketing attribution category is growing. But basically, every point of market share that Visible is losing, Hockey Stack is picking up. But Hockey Stack is picking it up because people just dropped several tens of millions of dollars onto Hockey Stack, and so they're out spending money like a drunken sailor. But that money goes a long ways if your market share leader is completely falling on their face. And so, and again, none of this has anything to do with marketing. It's right time, right place, lots of money, someone else making a mistake. It does have something to do with being able to step in and take advantage of some of other people's mistakes. The last way that you see growth, which is probably the rarest of all because there just aren't a lot of these out there, is if you introduce 100x or 1000x innovation that completely shifts the underlying price elasticity curve, then what happens is your product becomes, even if it has a higher price point, it becomes, if it is radically cheaper than all of the alternatives on the market in terms of the price to value ratio for the thing that matters to the buyer, then two things happen. One is you will drain adjacent categories, and then you will also can activate latent demand in the market. Someone who wasn't willing to buy the products that were available at the prior price to value ratio, if you 100x change that equation, then there are people sitting on the sidelines that will suddenly come out of, there'll be this latent demand that you'll be able to have emerge out of the market and turn into, people shoving cash at you. And the classic example of this was the iPod. And if you look at the details of the iPod, they came in at $400 when it was first launched. The 800,000 pound gorilla in the market was Sony at the time. So Sony had completely controlled the portable music market for 25 years. And their flagship product was the Sony Discman, which was a $300 product. The iPod was a $400 product. Apple was very late to the MP3 player market. There was already dozens of competitors in that market. The leader on the MP3 player was Creative Designs with the Rio, which came in at $200. And so the Rio people decided that we need to sell the product cheaper than the market leader. So and the only way to get it cheaper than $300 is to skimp on the electronics. Well, it turns out that the single most expensive part of the electronics was the memory, the RAM. And so what they decided to do was to skimp on the amount of RAM so that the device could only hold 10 songs.
No.
And And so, yeah, and so the
You better be picky. You better pick them right.
but their thinking was, you know, it is, you know, it is, um, you know, a third cheaper than the market leader, and it has exactly the same number of songs. And what Apple realized is that people aren't buying, you know, a handful of electronic components; they're buying songs in your pocket. And so when Apple came out, you know, one of the things they did was they switched from RAM to spinning disk drives, which were cheaper, but I mean cheaper on a per megabyte basis, but more expensive. You know, they came out with a product that was a third again more expensive than the competitor. You know, so $400 instead of $300. But at 1,000 songs in your pocket, it was 75 times cheaper than any other product on the market, simply because people were paying for how many songs in their pocket, not for, you know, how many transistors are inside the piece of plastic. And you know, and as a result, they completely annihilated the market in 4 years. So within 4 years' time, they had taken almost full market share in the portable music market. So, but very few companies are able to do 100x or 1,000x, you know, product innovation. But that is definitely a way to take market share, and it's why typically these stories are only come out of the tech world, because you know, no one is going to invent a new laundry detergent that's 1,000 times better than Tide. Yeah, no,
in their bathtub.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to come up with a new, you know, you know, milk-like, you know, drink that is 1,000 times better than cow's milk.
You know what? If you give me time, I could do it. How long is this, Chad? Okay, all right. So yes, let's get to this one.
So the fact is, market share growth is essentially a black swan event. So about 0.02% of brands ever have an opportunity to access the sort of the levels of external capital investment needed to grow. You know, this typically happens in only three ways: either venture capital investment, private equity investment, or you either get acquired or launched by one of the massive consumer product brands, you know, company like P&G, or a company like Unilever. So very rare. The other thing is that for the most part, once a brand gets big, it is really hard, you know, for them to get toppled. They really have to make a lot of fundamental mistakes for years and years at a time before they fall. And you know, in the case of Siebel, it took Siebel 20 years to implode. They were making mistakes for a long, long time before they finally folded up. And so it is very rare to be lucky enough to have the market leader, you know, light themselves on fire. And you know, and what's even rarer than any of these events, you know, is the ability to, you know, introduce, you know, a sort of a 100x product innovation that's capable of really disrupting the market. You know, and even a lot of companies that can produce these sorts of products, they still struggle to produce one that actually disrupts the market. Great example is Apple Vision Pro. You know, the best product development company on the planet, with more money than God, you know, with massive name recognition, and you know, they produce a product that literally nobody wants to buy one. And if they do buy one, nobody has any clue what they're supposed to do with it. So what this means is that growth, almost all growth, is really riding the wave of category growth. It's revenue growth. So, you know, and we have data on this. I mean, we've got data, and nobody wants to talk about this because this is not a happy story, but we have data going back almost a century, looking at relative market share across thousands of product categories. And what the data shows is that relative market share is extremely stable over the span of years to decades. Brands almost never take market share. And some examples: Tide is the #1 brand of laundry detergent in the US, 40% market share. It's been the #1 brand since 1947. Boeing, number one producer of commercial aircraft, and has been the number one producer since 1929. Colgate was the number one toothpaste from 1897 to 1962. Then Crest overtook them from 62 to 97. And then Colgate overtook Crest in 1997, a century after it launched, and has held that position to the present day.
Toothpaste wars. Oh, we got to write that novel.
But these market share leader positions tend to be held for decades, and it usually requires a company really fundamentally, let's say, pouring gasoline over themselves and setting themselves on fire to lose that top market position,
and also hoping that your competitors maybe do that too.
Yes. So we don't have to look at old data. We can look at new data. So there's recent research on market share growth. And so basically, Ehrenberg Bass Institute has definitively shown that brands almost never grow through market share. It's probably the single best study in the last 20 years on this. And so in a study of 639 brands across 28 categories, they tracked each individual brand across over 5 years. And this is what they found. The average total 5-year market share gain across all 639 brands was 0.01%. That's 1/100th of 1 percentage point of market share gain in 5 years. So a third of the brands had exactly 0 market share growth over the entire 5-year period. Another third saw slight losses in market share. Only 4% saw even a mere 1% per year market share growth rate.
Can I ask one question? These people, they've been marketing, they've been advertising, they've been pushing things, they've been innovating, they've been, they've been doing all those brand growth things that you were saying before, and this is the end result of all of that. Like these people that have held these places and not gone anywhere.
Right.
Were they marketing with great aplomb and verve and
Yeah.
Or
I mean,
and they weren't.
this is a lot of brands to look at. This is a really very, very large study.
A lot of stories happening here.
I've got some quotes from the paper in a second that are very enlightening. So, but this is what the data looks like.
Word.
So, a third of the brands, the middle bar, absolutely 0 movement over a 5-year period. And just very, very, you have another 16-17% that have 0.2% compounded annual growth. Very, very tiny amounts.
Wow.
So here are a couple of slides of direct quotes from the Ehrenberg Bass researchers that come directly out of the paper. Marketing practitioners spend a great deal of money and effort to increase their brand's market share. Empirical evidence, however, has shown that the norm is long-term equilibrium. Another quote, it has been established that marketing activity does not affect most brand market shares in the medium or even long term. This is the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. To continue, consistent with the findings from previous research, because again, they're citing research going all the way back into the 1960s. Consistent with the findings from previous research, this finding shows that most brands are in stationary markets. Stationary meaning it's not moving. Next quote. The marketing literature shows strong evidence towards overall market stationarity. We've confirmed this result with our most recent long-term data. And then finally, our results also support the previous proposition that marketing interventions have limited effects on long-term equilibrium. Yep. Michael?
So when we're talking about this, it's the conclusion is basically get rid of your market marketing department because
no.
Is that what you read, Michael?
Yeah, that was going
None
to
of-
be my question, Dale. So, like, what's the punch here? Marketers should do
so
what?
so
He,
my
he
Well,
has
I mean,
that coming up too.
my question is, anytime you're doing some research on something and trying to draw conclusions about it, there are a lot of variables that have to be considered. And if you're looking at like brands like Colgate and Crest, they're what you might call mature brands.
Right.
And and then you have new brands that are associated with doing new things, and by definition, they can only grow. But I think
No, they can go out of
bigger-
business too.
the bigger question for me is, and we've talked about this before, but when marketing budgets are being run by like a CFO, and not the CEO. Marketing is, I mean, I guess the real question that I have is how are you defining marketing? Because
Mm.
everyone knows thinks
the
of
four Ps.
advertising as marketing, but we all
Yeah.
know that there's a lot more to it than that. There's a getting your message out, and then there's a listening aspect and an innovation aspect to it. And I have a hard time believing that if you're listening and innovating, that your brand market share isn't going to reflect that. But if you're in
But-
this mode of
I can see
here's
it.
our product,
But-
everyone knows what it is,
but-
and there's not really much more we can do with it, it
But-
makes sense, like a Tide or something like that.
But
I
what
don't
that
know if
says
that's what he's
is,
saying.
but what that says is that your intuition is completely, totally at odds with a century worth of data.
Mm.
Yeah, if you look at the 22 insurmountable rules of marketing or whatever, it basically does say what Dale is saying, right? There's like, if you ask in the consumer's mind, there's two market leaders in any given period of time, right? Like people don't have 15 brands stuck in their brain; they have two. So, like, if you actually look at it, makes sense. Like, this is not like, to me, it's when it's put the way Dale's saying it, it's shocking. But when you really think about it and how business works, it completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that's just how it works. Like, one of the laws is like you have to be first to market. Yeah, a lot of these brands,
So-
that's what they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fact is, there are lots of brands that are very profitable, and lots of brands that see strong revenue growth. Neither one of those have anything to do with taking market share. You can have strong revenue growth and be very profitable and be bleeding market share right and left.
Mm.
Can't do that forever, but you can certainly be in that situation. But the other thing is that, find examples of brands that grew market share, that either did not have 100x innovation, in a new product concept, or did not have a market share leader that poured gasoline over themselves and set themselves on fire, or did not have somebody drop $500 million in their back pocket.
Right.
So find me a company that doesn't meet one of those three criteria, that took significant market share. And the reality is, it doesn't exist. I've looked. They just don't exist.
And what's the
And-
median age of those brands in terms of like how established they've been? Like,
Yeah, I
what
don't
is
know,
the
but I mean, it's
threshold? Because it seems like that's the important thing, right? It's like every brand, and we talked about this about brand shelf lives. Remember that, guys?
Mm.
And so it's like once your brand has reached a certain age or threshold, it's like, okay, now you shouldn't be spending very much money on it, because
no, that's not true. You have to. You look at
protect your-
every market share leader.
Just stay there.
So, if we look at Salesforce has at this point essentially an unassailable position at about 30 or 35% market share in the CRM market. They are spending between $14 and $15 billion a year, which turns out to be roughly 43% of their top line revenue. If you look at HubSpot is basically a slightly over $2 billion company. So a tiny fraction of the size. but it has been around. HubSpot's been around for 20 years. HubSpot spends 45% of top line revenue on marketing. And you see this pattern over and over again in categories. Doesn't matter whether it's a new brand, an old brand, a mature brand, an immature brand. Everybody within a category has a tendency to spend a roughly equivalent percentage of top line revenue. NVIDIA spends 2.1% of revenue. Intel spends 1.7% of revenue. And so category after category, you see this pattern where there is this kind of natural equilibrium that it takes the whole market share. But the market share leader is vastly outspending, the smaller brands, but they're all spending roughly an equivalent fraction of top line revenue.
When you look at Intel, who has the famous, they spend a lot of money on their Sonic advertising, done, and you look at HubSpot and the way they advertise, which crashed a little bit ago, was by providing value-adding content. Like, it seems like it's just more of a reminder that we exist than some of these conversion-oriented funnel things, right? I mean, I know that HubSpot has a very clear funnel, but you're constantly reminded that HubSpot exists. You're constantly reminded that Intel exists.
But you're not constantly. You are vastly more constantly reminded that Salesforce exists. Simply because Salesforce is spending. I mean, Salesforce spends more. Salesforce spends more every 3 weeks on marketing than HubSpot spends in an entire year.
Wow.
So you can't, you absolutely cannot cut back on spending just because you're, a highly stable, extremely mature brand. Because the moment you quit spending, you will start falling out of people's heads. And this is the thing I say about brand marketing is that there is no such thing as brand equity. There is no such thing as brand marketing giving you compound returns. These are silly language. That brand marketing is paying rent. We're renting a space inside the heads of a finite number of people, and we have to keep paying rent, or we're going to get evicted. And it is a wasting asset. It's essentially you're renting so many square feet of space inside. So you got 3 square inches of space inside 100,000 people's heads.
Woo. Moni.
So Dale, I see you see it with the what I call the modern marketing out here. These mostly SaaS and tech companies, but it's spread to all kinds of industries of like the reverse thinking, right? There's less and less money invested in marketing and marketing efforts. I've seen companies around here 1% of revenue is spent on marketing. I'm sure you've seen that too as well. What is that pervasive? It's the opposite of everything you've been talking about. So I don't hear I want to grow market share. I hear I'm trying to do this on the cheapest possible. Give me the biggest results for the least amount of input I possibly can.
Right. So again, if everybody, everybody that owns a chip foundry does marketing, Intel, NVIDIA, AMD, but everybody who owns a chip foundry is spending between 1.5 and 2% of top line revenue on marketing. And so as a result, you have this kind of equilibrium level within the market. So, you can spend very tiny amounts so long as everyone else is spending an equally tiny amount. And what seems to happen in categories is that there is an intuitive sense of how much you need to spend to hold your position. And companies tend to, because again, companies properly understand that money spent on marketing is a pure expense. And that, and so you would like to spend as little of that money on the pure expense as you can, because you'd much rather give it to shareholders or bonuses to the executives. And so every company is going to try to find that equilibrium to where we spend as little as possible without something really bad happening. And this is why you can't look at the total amount of reach or the total amount of spend. You have to look at the relative investment as a function of top line revenue within the category.
And Dale, you have specific things. Let's get back to your thing because you have
Yeah, I've got a couple of things coming up on this. Yeah,
advice that we can leave.
So, but I mean, these two slides worth of quotes directly from the Ehrenberg Bass might
You're
seem
right.
remarkably at odds with certain books that got published. And you would not be mistaken in that assumption. So basically, brands, as a general rule, do not grow through taking market share. So brands can grow revenue if they're lucky enough, to put their boat on a rising lake and take their fair share of category growth. Brands cannot take market share through marketing alone. They either need a competitor to stumble or they need massive injections of external cash. And as a result, what you see over and over again is even as categories grow, big brands, meaning high market share brands, stay big and small brands stay small. And this is, and what I'm about to show next is kind of the root cause behind this. So how brands grow prescriptions fail. So their central prescription is brands grow through increasing mental and physical availability through broad reach marketing. So theoretically, this is a true statement, but it's not a pathway that's open to most brands because the unanswered question is, where's the cash coming from? Yeah, I'd love to have 100-fold more mental availability. Is somebody going to give this to me? Someone's got to pay for this. And so the flaw in the entire narrative is this concept that I call everything works at zero. If everything is free, then there's all of these fabulous things that work amazing. But the moment you have to start paying for stuff, it doesn't work so well. And so this is what happens here. Reach requires sufficient levels of free cash flow in the business to be available to invest. Now, the exception to this is if someone drops $500 million in your back pocket, now you got a lot of extra cash that didn't come from customers. But typically for, literally 99.98% of all brands, cash flow comes from existing customer purchases. It's not falling out of the sky. And the existing flow of customer purchases is limited by your existing market penetration, and market penetration is entirely constrained by your existing market share. Max reach is determined by existing market share, unless someone's willing to drop $350 million on you, like what happened with Liquid Death. So growth through getting more mental availability is a snake eating its tail. Every brand is locked in place based on their existing share of market. And, so large brands are large because they have more customers, which is true. And those customers are slightly more loyal than small brands. So this is an absolutely true statement. And this is the central thesis that you see out of Ehrenberg Bass. Large brands are large because they have more customers who are slightly more loyal than smaller brands. This is purely a descriptive statement that tells us nothing about how those large brands got large. In the same way that it's an absolutely true statement that rich people own more private jets than poor people. But this doesn't tell us anything about how those rich people got their money or what poor people could do to be less poor. According to, you just need more mental availability argument. This is equivalent to telling poor people that they just need to go out and buy themselves a private jet and then they'll be just like a rich person. And it doesn't, where's the cash coming from? This is the question. So what is marketing's role? This is the real question. So number one role is to play the Red Queen game, to hold on to what you've already got, to hold on to existing market share. If you're not out there marketing at basically as fast and hard a pace as you possibly can within the financial constraints of the business, you're going to lose market share. And so this is kind of the Red Queen problem. You have to run as fast as you can to just stay in place. The other thing is to take your fair share of the underlying category growth. And again, that doesn't happen automatically. You have to be out there actively present in the market. But and the other thing is, your fair share is essentially the fraction of growth that's roughly equal to your existing market share. So if you have 10% market share, but the underlying category is doubling every year, you're going to get about 10% of that doubling. You're not going to get all of it because other people are out there scraping for the same amount. And as you take that revenue growth, that gives you more top line revenue, which gives you more free cash flow, which means that you now have more cash to spend on marketing, which means you can get more reach. But that more reach is simply allowing you to hold on to those extra customers that flooded into the category that's driving the underlying category growth. So, the other thing is to opportunistically go after market openings when competitors stumble and start to surrender market share. The moment somebody makes a stumble, the door is wide open to going after them. And and there's lots and lots of interesting examples where companies don't take advantage of this. I mean, right now, what's interesting is if you look at Hockey Stack versus Visible, Visible is just falling off a cliff. Almost every point of market share that's being lost by Visible is being picked up by Hockey Stack. But Hockey Stack, I don't think sees that. I think that they're all sitting around thinking that they're fucking geniuses because they've got $50 million sitting that someone gave them, and their major competitors collapsing. But it's all it's all due to what they're doing. It's nothing about these other things.
Yeah.
And and then the last the last role that marketing has is to hope somebody drops $500 million on you, because if you do, and you can, and you're clever enough to really take advantage of that money, you can go out and take a lot of market share, at least until the pot runs dry. But but a lot of marketing is about holding what you've got, and defending your position, and then being opportunistic, when external events occur. So marketing is largely the price you pay to keep what you've got.
I mean, within 1 minute, he comes in, and if you notice that all your crops are bent, if you notice that the door is blown off the hinges, if you know that there's like rocks that have flown in through the windows, it's the Dale Force winds. It's really so true. Before we go, I have one question, and it's, why are people so irreverent about your findings? Why is there so much irreverence around this research that is empirical and proven? Why are we so irreverent about this?
What do you mean irreverent?
No one's taking it seriously. You just told us how it works, and everyone argues with you endlessly how you don't really get it. Dollars, Jim Shark, you don't understand. These are new things.
Because
why are we so irreverent?
Yeah, because everybody believes that the rains come because you've pleased the thunder gods, not because it just happens.
Well, shake a rain stick.
But
stop praying.
But part of the problem is that one, it's a seductive narrative that you can somehow just magically grow brands. And again, if you could, you would see highly unstable markets where brands are, where relative market share is constantly churning. If you have, someone has a slightly better ad, and they just took 20 points of market share with it, it never happens, because it's not about how good the ad is. It's about how many people see it, and how many people see it is strictly dependent on how much cash you got.
It's so beautiful. It ladders down to a bunch of things, but I hope the main takeaway from all of this is nuance, and everything exists on a spectrum. So if you have a problem seeing the rainbow for the colors, or the forest for the trees, you got to connect with Dale Harrison. Connect with him on LinkedIn. We're going to consolidate this for everybody and wrap it up in another bow, and hopefully it gives enough. If they have questions, Dale, they can just.
Yeah, well, but the other is, does anybody have any questions right now?
Hey,
I have one. after the punchline. What when one of my most frustrating experiences was when I was in my first corporate job that quickly became my only corporate job, and one of the things that frustrated me was the lack of interest in being innovative and trying new things. And when you're talking about a brand, you're talking about a specific brand, but in some cases, the brand is the only product that the company has. In other cases, it has multiple brands. So, and I don't like the whole idea of 18 different versions of Oreo cookies and Cheerios and like all that kind of stuff, like the whole brand extension stuff. I'm actually more interested in let's create a better cereal, period, and rebrand it as something new and innovative, and if you cannibalize your previous brand, then that's the price of doing business. But it depends again, like how many brands do you have as a company?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if instead of putting money into that whole just keeping what you have, maybe it makes sense to put some money into more innovation to develop new things that are different from what you're already doing, because we all know the only way that growth happens is with new things.
Yeah, but
So-
look at all these companies that put out all these new things, and what they end up buying it. Like, look at Ben and Jerry's or something like that. Like, the company buys it, then they put on all the restrictions of the corporate entity, and it turns to shit. Like, what is one company that's come up with anything good and innovative, like a legacy company in the last decade?
Well,
that's the point.
Yeah,
There's
but
all
here's
of us
one
out here being entrepreneurs and creating new stuff, doing new things, and these brands are like laser focused. We do this, like
We
the
do this.
railroad.
I mean, yeah,
right?
I mean that's the
We're in
thing.
the-
So we
not
as
realizing
entrepreneurs,
that
Yeah.
they were in the shit and people moving business and thinking they were in the railroad business. So they got their asses kicked by the airlines.
Well, I mean, the other thing you see is that product development is, and I've been very involved in product development work in the past. Product development is like, having, a hit song. It doesn't matter how good you are. Doesn't matter how well you did the music. You have no way to guess what song's going to hit and what song won't. The only way you're going to know is just do your best, toss it out there, and see if you're that 1 in 100 million that people actually care to listen to more than once. And
Well, let me tell you how you actually do it. You make 1,000 songs and hope that one of them hits. That's how you do it.
Well,
That's
even
why
there's
you
other,
invest in like 100 companies, hoping that one
Yeah.
of them is like 1,000.
It is a bit of scattershot.
Well, that's what I think. They're unicorns for a reason. They're
Right.
unicorns for a reason.
Exactly.
It's hard, man. It's difficult. Like just
Yeah.
but
saying,
look at
to get into people's brains and remove an existing thing is difficult. That's what you're trying to do. It's dang near impossible, bro. Coke's gonna be Coke because it's Coke. I don't care if Poppy
And
and
it has
people
to
come
be
along or
Coke.
whatever. You're not getting Coke out of here. Get out of here.
but what you see is across wide range of industries, whether it's software, it's FMCG goods, if it's pharmaceuticals, the big companies do not invest in product innovation. What they do is they wait for the evolutionary process to occur with the startups, and they let 1,000 startups, come up. 999 will fall on their face and go bankrupt, and one will be a success, and then they'll go in and buy that one. And you see this, for instance, with Pepsi versus Poppy recently.
Oh yeah,
Right.
They swooped in.
Poppy.
I know plenty about Poppy. Yeah.
You also saw this with Unilever and Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah, I mean,
They come
Dollar
in.
Shave Club, but they it was called Dollar Shave Club. Now it's called DSC, like because they realized they can't make money on $1.
Right.
Right. And then you look at Harry's as a company that had all these great razors. I follow the shrinkflation thing on on Reddit, and Harry's used to have a beautiful razor, and it was made with steel and all nice components. Now it's all plastic and it's crap.
Yeah. But what you see is companies like Unilever, P&G, Pfizer, Salesforce, they buy the small startups that survived that were with an innovative product, and then they pull it into their portfolio because it's too risky to try to create a new product.
Well, and
let other
also
people take the risk.
The other example is, I remember back in the day, there was this really innovative service where you would go and get lunch, and you would scan some sort of code and you would buy the lunch, and then Seamless bought it. And then they got rid of that because it was innovative and it threatened Seamless. You know?
Well, I mean, the exact same thing happened with the IBM PC. That the reason that IBM owned the PC market in the 80s and completely lost it in the 90s wasn't because they had a great product in the 80s, because the first version of the PC, if you look at the model numbers, the original IBM PC was an IBM model 5150.
All right,
It
guys,
was
I gotta go.
Okay,
See ya.
bye.
Is he being paged? Is he a cardiologist? Okay.
So the original IBM PC was an IBM model 5150. It was the 5th generation of a desktop PC that had first launched almost a decade earlier by IBM. But the problem was the 5100, the 5110, the 5120, all of these that came before, the mainframe and mini computer groups basically strangled the baby in the crib. And the head of IBM was convinced that desktop computing was the future. And so he created an entirely separate team 1,000 miles away from Armonk, the headquarters, down in Boca Raton, Florida. And it was called the Entry Systems Division. And they were the ones who basically picked up the product development thread, produced the 5th generation of a desktop, called it the IBM PC, and it blew up. And then what happened was, in the late 80s, the entire upper management, I mean, every last member of the management team of Entry Systems Group were all killed simultaneously in a Delta air crash in Dallas.
Oh, God.
And so it completely decapitated the IBM PC team. And what happened was the vultures came in. And so very quickly, the mini computer team demanded that the Entry Systems Group be pulled back to Armonk. And then they demanded that it be subservient to what they were doing around the AS400 development. And so what you got was the PS2, which was just a shit desktop. And it just went down from there because they were intentionally neutering the product to make sure that it could never compete with an AS400.
And you don't even know. You can't even look into Google's skeleton-filled closet graveyard.
Right, yeah.
I mean, like, your Pokemon thing was your Niantic thing, was your Google Maps, was your, everything is overlaying. YouTube wasn't a thing. Like, it's really odd. My main question, and then we should go, but the irreverence that we have for research is pissing me off. I don't appreciate that motherfuckers are talking to Dale, who's a goddamn astrophysicist, and being like, did you check your math? You have to sit the fuck down. 1, 2, how is it that everyone thinks they're on the cutting edge of innovation? And is this the most dangerous time for people to get an innovative idea? Like, because people think that they're about to innovate the crap out of everything with AI. AI is giving you all this stuff. But as you just said, price elasticity curve, I was like, that's not here for AI. There's a lot of problems with the market for AI itself. But we're thinking that it's going to give us this innovation. Why does everybody think that like, it's just like this endless innovation? We have to keep innovating. But honestly, you're not even going to be like, they don't pursue the right jobs. They pursue the bad ideas. They're thinking, like, it just kills me that great ideas are needed and people aren't coming up with them because they're thinking that they need to be on the cutting edge when you just need to focus on one small thing. Like, do you think about this at all? Are you upset that the future is their business? HVAC's in the future. Everybody's in the future. Like,
yeah, I mean, but innovation's been around a long time, you know, and
Oh,
it's
no.
never, and it hasn't really changed.
no.
You know,
Why
you
does
know,
everybody now think that they have an innovative thing? Like
yeah,
everybody.
well, everyone's always thought they had an innovative thing.
Is that true?
Yeah,
Those,
I mean, you go back, you know, 2 centuries. You know, someone figured out, you know, this amazing innovation. I can take this steam engine and I can put it on wheels.
well, that's useful. But then someone was like, I'm about to piss inside this thing and turn it into gold. And that like didn't work out. You know, so it's like
Well, but lots of innovations just don't go anywhere. So
that's it. I hate that.
and that's the problem is it's no different than hit songs or hit movies.
And you're so right.
It's hard to make a hit. And because if we knew how to make a hit movie, every movie would be a hit because nobody would fund anything that wasn't automatically going to be a hit. Nobody would fund recording a single song if it wasn't going to be a big hit. If you could figure out, and nobody would fund anything other than successful innovation if you could figure out what was going to be successful. The only way you know is to make the investment up front and then see if anybody wants it.
Do the hard work.
And it's hard to know.
Yeah, it's so hard to know. But what you've given us is a great blended conversation because I was coming into this thinking that I should just crawl under a bus and die. But at the end of this, I'm thinking it's the most imperative thing a company can do to maintain where you're at. And these small little, you can increase it, but don't start thinking. It just brings us down to earth. And I think that's,
you know, you know, I mean, you know, priests and cult leaders and shaman for, you know, 100,000 years have always known that everyone wants to be lied to. Everyone wants to be told that this really hard thing is actually super easy if you just use the magic formula that I have. And you know, and people will line up to be lied to. And I think that this whole, you know, sort of pornography around brand growth is a great example of this. Nobody's asking extremely obvious questions. Nobody is tying this back. Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I always throw out is that if it was this easy to grow a brand, you just need to go out and get yourself some more of that their mental availability stuff. If it was that easy, you just need a bit more, you know, you just need more market penetration. If it was that easy, that book has been out for 15 years. That narrative has been out for 20 years. In 20 years' time, there should be not a dozen, not 100, not 1,000. There should be tens of thousands of brands that have seen massive market share growth over the last 20 years because the recipes are clearly very easy. Just go out and buy yourself some, you know, buy yourself more reach, get yourself more mental availability. So why isn't the current edition of How Brands Grow, why does it not come with an appendix with a list of 1,000 companies that have used their formula and massively grown the brand? Why do they not? Why do they not have a page on their website?
It's not a formula. You know, I think that's exactly what it is. Like you could add all these ingredients, but the truth is that there's no novelty in that. And
but you can't add the ingredients. I mean, the problem is that the ingredients require you to spend a lot of money that you don't have.
Yeah.
And the fact is, if you have the cash, you know, if we will, you know, the one thing that Liquid Death tells us is that if someone drops $500 million on you, you can definitely take market share. So it is true that all you have to do to take market share is to get more mental availability by buying more reach. 100% true. And Liquid Death is the proof of that. And the way Liquid Death did that is somebody dropped $350 million on them. So
give me some of that.
So the problem is that the prescription is technically true but completely meaningless.
But
You know,
there
if
is something here for us to take. I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't feel hopeless. That's my takeaway from
Yeah.
is that it doesn't
Well-
feel hopeless at all.
I mean, and there are definitely brands that do grow market share without excess capital. They're
Right.
very rare, and and they are doing things that are vastly more sophisticated and subtle than you just need more mental availability. That there are distortions and nonlinearities in the market that you can absolutely take advantage of. And one example is you have a market level ad response curve. So
Oh, yeah.
as you spend more and more money in the market, you'll get a linear response. And then at some point, the curve will roll over. And as you keep spending more and more money, you're getting less and less response for each dollar. And what that means is that a dollar spent on reach by a large brand is going to be less effective than that exact same dollar spent on the exact same reach in the exact same channels versus a small brand. And there are ways to take information like that. I mean, this is a very subtle effect, but there are ways to take information like that to figure out, how to spend the dollars you've got, at fixed budget and get more out of those dollars within certain channels than your large competitors are. And a lot of times the large competitors are overspending, so they're already way up where that ad response curve is rolled over flat.
And to connect to the earlier thing, they're probably spending at that level because their competitors are spending at that level.
Yeah.
Because everybody's so it's like
but there are ways. I mean, there are things you can do, but it requires, but like many things, there's no get rich quick scheme. There's no sort of my simple 5-point plan for you to become a millionaire. That's a con artist. And and anybody that has that's going to tell you that there's a simple plan to do a hard thing is somebody who's probably trying to con you out of something. And and you need to ask some hard questions, because if it was this easy, everybody would be doing it. And the fact is that there's now almost a generation of marketers who've grown up on these prescriptions that are struggling to try to do it, and they're not getting any market share growth.
God,
so why?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, so we're gonna wrap it up. I think people need to connect with you and get at this problem. It's not as easy as you think it is. But it isn't impossible. I think that's the main take.
That's a good conclusion.
You have to find your possible.
But the point is that you have to give up the fantasy and take a hard look at the reality you're dealing with to have any hope of being able to tackle the hard solutions to the hard problems. Because as long as you believe the fantasy, as long as you get hooked in by someone telling you that there are simple solutions to these hard problems, you're going to spend all your effort trying. And this is what happens. This is fascinating. People will follow these prescriptions and it won't work. And their assumption is, it must be me. I must be doing something wrong. And this is a very, very ancient human response. I mean, 10,000 years ago, when people were praying to the to the thunder gods for rain, and then the rains didn't come, the assumption wasn't that maybe there's a problem with this whole thunder god thing. The assumption was, well, we just weren't praying hard enough, or we weren't praying the right way, or maybe we need to sacrifice a few virgins to throw it into the mix. And so they don't assume that the underlying prescription's wrong. They assume that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and see, that's the kindness that I feel when I'm looking at your research. I can tell, because as I was hearing this, I was like, does this guy hate us? And I said that in the comment. You either hate us or you love us, and I'm not sure which one. But I think ultimately what it is, Dale, is that you've given us a kindness, by taking a look at this stuff that we are not. We are driving by like sort of tourists. And I think you've decided to move in and give us the lay of the land. And if people want to connect with you and learn more about you, where can they do that? Is LinkedIn the place?
LinkedIn's the place. By the way, I'll give you one last quote.
Yes.
So everything in How Brands Grow and all of the narrative, out of Ehrenberg Bass is strictly based on Andrew Ehrenberg's NBD Dirichlet model.
Right.
So let's take a look at what Andrew Ehrenberg had to say about his own NBD Dirichlet model. This is a direct quote from his book, Repeat Buying. And so this is the 1988 edition of the book. This came out several years after the kind of the final paper that fully described and established the NBD Dirichlet model. Right. He says, the theory discussed here, NBD Dirichlet, does not account in direct terms for any dynamic effects of advertising, pricing, etc., in changing the level of sales. It is not that sort of theory. Put in another way, this model tells us more or less all about stationary buyer behavior, except for one thing, namely why one brand has more buyers than another. Andrew Ehrenberg, 1988. That is, I think that is a really damning quote. And the deal is that if you read his papers, his academic papers, all the way back into the 1950s, he went to pains to try to explain that there's nothing in this model that tells you anything about how markets change. There's nothing in here that tells you how to grow a brand. Unfortunately, in the papers, because they were written for an academic audience, the language tended to be extremely arcane and academic, and in such a way that if you didn't understand how to read that language, it was not obvious what he was saying. And the great thing about the quote from this book is he's writing this book for practitioners, and he's putting this paragraph in as a warning for what you could not expect to be able to extract from this model.
Which is weird because when you're squinting, you're like, "Ooh, they kind of rounded up a whole bunch there."
But this entire narrative that's been built is just fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
It's a series of technically, theoretically true statements but none of them tell you how to actually change the market.
Well, you've given it to us, and I think we're going to give it back to them, and then you're going to come into the comments and help us. But let's we'll sign off, and then we'll just see you on LinkedIn. And I mean, we're still recording.
Yeah, wait, we're still recording.
Oh my God! I almost took off my top.
I gotta run, but this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Dale. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
have a good weekend.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye, Dale.
Okay.